Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle. Doctors change lives every day, but what happens when life changes yours? A single injury, a sudden illness, your career, your income, your future can shift in an instant. The best physicians don't just plan for success, they protect it. At Set for Life Insurance, they believe financial security isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. True own occupation disability insurance ensures that no matter what happens, your future stays in your hands. Because protecting your income means protecting everything you've built. Visit drpodcastnetwork.co/setforlife today. Secure your future before life makes that choice for you. Welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode, for those of you who have been asking for more business in medicine, here we go. We've got an HR professional. So Kerri Roberts is a 20-year plus HR professional with expertise in operational excellence and strategic HR across industries like healthcare and higher education. She holds a BSBA in marketing and an MBA and has been recognized by organizations like Women of Excellence and Athena International. As the owner of the HR consulting firm, Carrie helps small to mid-sized businesses improve operations, culture, and growth. She also founded Salt and Light for Women, hosts the podcast Don't Waste the Chaos, is writing 2 HR-focused books. Her experience includes roles with the Missouri Quality Award and Malcolm Baldrige program. Kerri Roberts, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So first, let's talk about emerging trends or legal issues. What are the emerging trends or the legal issues that physicians should be aware of? So some of us practice ownership positions where we might be responsible for some of the HR, and some of us are employed physicians, but still, these are things that we should be aware of. A lot of us are in leadership positions. So what are some of the emerging trends that physicians should be aware of, like changes in employment laws or non-competes?
So when it comes to employment laws, 3 things that I would recommend that you keep on your radar. The first one is the non-compete agreements. We saw this kind of tick up and then it died back down based on a court case. I don't think that it's completely dead. I think we'll continue to see that the FTC in various states are going to be moving toward limiting or banning non-competes, especially for employees with lower wages. And so for physicians, this trend might impact like contract negotiations or geographic restrictions, maybe patient relationships. So I would stay up to date on the state-specific non-compete changes that may be happening in 2025.
So we were hoping that the non-competes would protect us. But you're saying it's most likely going to be in favor of those with lower wages, which does not include us. So it sounds like it's going to protect other people, but not necessarily us, like our employee, but not us. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's exactly what it's looking like. When I was looking at what the rulings were going to say and like how would it impact your listeners, I think it's mostly going to be protecting those individuals that you hire at your practice.
All right. Hey, listen, they need protections. They're the most vulnerable. Those that earn the least, have the least leverage. So it's good that's in place for them.
So TBD if that happens. Another thing I take a look at, the IRS is really cracking down. I'm seeing a lot of increased scrutiny around, and the DOL, the Department of Labor, whether workers are truly independent contractors or employees. And so this could impact small practices or locum tenens roles, and misclassifications can lead to hefty fines. Let me give you an example. If somebody should have been an employee when they were a contractor, you might have to go backdate. Let's say also they weren't only supposed to be an employee, they were supposed to be maybe an hourly employee. That individual can guess how many hours. Maybe they worked more than 40. Now you're looking at potential overtime. So there's a lot that could go to it. And it's going to be like up to the individual to report that, and likely not as many checks and balances. It's going to rule in favor of the employees.
So for those physicians that do locum tenens, currently you are an independent contractor, which leads to the potential for a lot of deductions to offset your taxes. So are you saying that's going to change?
So that's not going to change, but here's an example. There's a lot of people that classify somebody as a contractor, but then they treat them like an employee. If you tell the individual when they need to work and how they need to work, what technology they need to utilize, there are a number of criteria that make someone start to look like a W-2 employee. And I've got like a one pager that I send out to people. It's just a free guide to give you some specifics. But literally, if you hop on OpenAI or Google or whatever and type difference between employee and contractor, it's going to give you some criteria. And I would run every single person in your organization that you've got on contract status through that to make sure that you've got people classified correctly, because you probably want to keep them on contract status, but you need to think through, okay, I'm probably treating them a little bit more like an employee in a few different areas. So I need to clean this practice up.
Got it. That makes sense. So you can keep them categorized as such more than likely, but maybe tweak some things in terms of their responsibilities and how they answer to you to make sure that they are clearly classified in that status. Because from what I've heard about the Department of Taxation is it's guilty until proven innocent. Like they assume that you did things incorrectly, and then you have to prove that you did things correctly. If it means you're not going to have to pay as much in taxes, they're going to say, prove why you have to pay less in taxes. Not like, all right, we're going to show you what you did wrong. More like you have to prove it to them.
Yeah. And I would say the pendulum swings depending on who's in administration. And also it depends on the judge. There's so many times that you can be following HR law as closely as you can, but it's up to the judge. And we have been in a season for a lot of years now where mostly rulings have led on the side of the employee and not on the side of the employer. And it's just something to keep in mind. And then I'd also mention pay transparency laws. We've seen a few states like California, New York, and Colorado requiring that salary pay ranges be put in job postings. That's something that I'm assuming more states are going to pick up over time. So if you're not already posting potential job, like pay bands, ranges, salary ranges, or things like that, it's just something to think about.
Okay. So what about emerging trends in like workplace culture expectations? Because that seems to be something that is always evolving, right? How do we stay ahead of that?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I would take into consideration, and I'm sure most employers, but a lot of leaders are probably tired of hearing this, but it's not going to go away. Talking about work-life integration or work-life balance, mental health support, all of that is rising. So even in high pressure fields, or even more so in high pressure fields like healthcare, younger physicians, younger people across the board are prioritizing flexible schedules, wellness programs, transparent leadership. And that's going to be a huge point. I think all of the return to physical locations for staff that have been potentially working from home, like we're seeing anarchies rising up. Like people are like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. And you can't make me, I'll leave. And they'll find a place that, so I don't think that's going to change. And then I'd also say we've heard a lot of buzz in the professional world around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Patients are increasingly expecting culturally competent care. And so I think practices need to make sure they're fostering an inclusive workplace culture to attract and retain diverse talent. So that way it reflects the client base or the patient base.
So I don't want to get too political here because I'm not sure but with the upcoming administration, it makes like the federal administration, it makes me think, first of all, you'd mentioned taxes. So with the upcoming administration, and depending on when this airs, it might be the current administration, it looks like none of us are going to have to pay taxes. There are lots of loopholes for the wealthy, and it looks like they're probably going to increase with their ethos the size of those loopholes. But the same thing, their perspective on diversity, equity, inclusion, and also work from home. Like they've been outspoken about the fact that they want everybody in the office and then will lay people off. So how much does the federal government set the tone for issues like those?
When you look at, and I will say I live on a 140-acre farm. My husband's a veteran and I have a shooting range out my window. So if that gives you any kind of idea of where I land on any of this, but the administration right now isn't making that like a primary immediate focus. So even if the pendulum is going to swing back in the other direction, are they going to truly put things in place in the first year or 2 years that is going to truly roll back any of the changes that have happened over the last 4? I don't know. The HR realm isn't necessarily one that most people care about. I think regardless of what the administration does, people have grown accustomed to this. And so it's going to impact your culture, whether or not if President Trump says, this is what we're going to do, there's still going to be people who are like, no, and I don't like that. And now I don't like you because you're making me do it regardless of what the administration is saying. People have very strong opinions on how they interact with work now and how being physically in work either positively or negatively impacts their mental health or having to commute or so on and so forth. So even if the administration pushes things forward, we have to think about it from a cultural perspective, because there will be some practices, some employers that are going to say, no, we want this to be more employee centric. And so you're going to be competing for talent that way. So I still think it's going to be a big trend.
So it can be part of an arms race for recruiting.
Yes.
Right? We're going to let you work from home. We're going to make sure we have leadership and more people that look like you, so you'll feel way more comfortable here and have them in leadership positions. So the more you have that out there, the more competitive those places become. And so irrespective of who's in the administration, this has become part of the American fabric, and it's going to keep moving in that direction.
Yeah, it's recruitment and retention. Yep.
Okay. That is encouraging. So for someone who's starting their own practice or joining a smaller practice that isn't large enough to have their own HR professional, like my practice, we're fortunate enough, we're a private practice, but we're huge. So we have an HR department. But if you're a 10-person practice or a 5-person practice, you are HR. You're the practice owner, you are HR. So is there anything else, any other critical bits of knowledge that aren't necessarily even an emerging trend, but just something to make sure that you are doing to not mess things up for those practice owners?
Yeah. And I would say really the best practice for hiring a full-time HR pro is usually you have, for every 100 employees, you've got, the data says 1.04 from an FTE perspective, full-time employee equivalent perspective for HR. So a lot of people don't hire until they get around 100. They don't hire like a full-time HR person. And that's pretty much best practice. And I work with a ton of firms that have under 100, because then we become their fractional HR. That's the whole reason why I founded my firm. A couple of things to take into consideration. You're going to want to look at what we've already talked about, the difference between W-2 employees and 1099 contractors. Also keeping in mind, even if they're W-2 employees, should they be exempt or non-exempt? And again, that's 5 primary criteria that you're going to want to review with every single role, because compliance missteps there can lead to audits and penalties. I would recommend the baseline, have job descriptions, an employee handbook, and employment agreements put in place to protect your practice and to clarify expectations. And then I would also make sure you're establishing guidelines for, let's say, harassment prevention, conflict resolution, patient care standards, and things like that. On a little bit more of the advanced side, regular training to ensure compliance that protects your practice legally. Also making sure that things around, let's say, like overtime pay. So FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act compliance, especially if you're hiring non-exempt staff like medical assistants or admin roles. Speaking of laws, I would make sure that you're paying attention to labor laws. And so some of the ones that you'd want to make sure that you've got policies or things in your handbook around would be around minimum wage, knowing what that is in your state, anti-discrimination laws like age discrimination, of course, racial discrimination. So making sure that you're paying attention to all of the title laws in that area for folks with disabilities, and then also FMLA. So if you've got 50 or more employees, you're required to have or to offer Family Medical Leave Act. If you have under 50, you still obviously want to offer some kind of leave alternative for folks because life is going to happen. So paying attention to the federal and then state specific leave laws, workers' compensation mandates, and then also for small practices or a new practice, regardless of size, we've talked a little bit about recruitment and retention, but offering competitive benefits like healthcare or retirement savings, those flexible scheduling options to remain attractive, HSA, telehealth options. But, you know, when we're thinking about, and I'm sure in healthcare, this is like something that you all think about all the time because you're working with insurance contracting and all of that good stuff, or some people are if they're accepting insurance. So if you have under 50 employees, a lot of organizations feel like I've got to offer health insurance, ancillary insurances, but that's actually a requirement when you have 50 employees. So for those practices that are smaller, there are really cool things that you can do to maintain your competitive nature, but not pay so stinking much when it comes to compensation and benefits.
Because you don't have the leverage. Like a large company is going to have leverage with the insurance companies to keep those. But if you're one of those places that's not big enough to have leverage, then that can be even more expensive for you.
That's so true. And just so many organizations are like, oh my gosh, my compensation and benefits, if you're minding your P&L, which you should be, that's going to be one of your largest line items. And so this is an area we cannot afford as business owners just to renew our plan or get on these big plans. Setting up like a direct care contract with a private practice to where maybe you've got like a subscription offering for your employees. I love that. I love it when employers are open to that kind of more innovative approach, or there's things like lifestyle spending accounts that you can put money into for your employees, and they can use that for things like Aura rings, or they can get a Stride health plan. There's a lot of different options that they can do, counseling for their teens or whatever. So you can still provide a benefits package that's maybe just a little bit more innovative or a little bit different than traditional.
Hey there, it's Brad. As someone who's passionate about podcasting, I've always thought there should be more support for physicians who want to share their stories and expertise. That's why we're launching Doctor Podcast Network.
We're bringing together a community of physician podcasters with one goal in mind: to provide the tools, connections, and resources you need to grow your show. So whether you've been podcasting for a while or maybe you're just starting, we've designed this network to support you every step of the way, and we're going to help each other rise, not compete.
If this sounds like something you'd benefit from, we'd love for you to join us as we get closer to launch. So you can sign up at drpodcastnetwork.co for early access. Stay tuned for more details in the coming weeks. Really looking forward to what we can create together. Doctor Podcast Network, where doctors podcast.
Doctor Podcast Network, where doctors podcast.
Doctor Podcast Network, where doctors podcast.
So this is really cool, but I still need to get health insurance type of a package.
Yes. Yeah. Or like Stride Health, you can get individual plans on that are really affordable. And that's coming straight from the marketplace. That's available to individuals. What I do for my team, because I have a very small team at my consulting firm, I put money into a lifestyle spending account. And then one of the things they can buy with that is health plans.
So it's a way to supplement their health insurance. So they've got to get it through the exchange, but you're putting some money towards it, but not paying for all of it. Yeah.
But not 40% or 60%.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. That's great advice. So actually we're already getting into the next question, which is a huge one, is hiring and retaining. So you already said you have all these great ideas for benefits. So let's start with hiring.
Yeah.
So what's your advice for hiring, for making sure that the person, what are we looking for when we're interviewing to make sure that this is someone who's going to fit in and thrive in our particular organization?
Yeah. So a couple of things that I would recommend before you even get to that interview process. When you decide that you want to hire for a person, the first thing I would do would be to craft a clear job description. And inside of that job description, I would outline everything that you're needing, including soft skills like communication, teamwork, adaptability, things like that. I would emphasize your practice's culture, growth opportunities that are available, what work-life integration or work-life balance looks like. Before you even post the job, I would outline all of that. So many organizations are like, we need a blah, 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 but they haven't decided what exactly that person's going to do or what success looks like for that individual. And then you go through the recruitment process, you hire the person, you're like, they're not working out. And we probably set them up for failure from the very, very beginning. So that's the first thing I would do, is draft that job description. And then I recommend using structured interviews. If I was going to post the job, I would first use an applicant tracking system, or inside of LinkedIn or Indeed, you can set up where the system essentially declines them if they don't hit minimum qualifications. So I would take the time to set up whatever system you're utilizing to weed out those folks who don't meet minimum qualifications. And then I would have your office manager or some kind of admin at your organization ask a couple of key phone interview questions. And that phone interview is just brief. It's 20 to 30 minutes. And you're literally trying to see, can they communicate? Are they professional? Why do they want to work here? It's really very basic and rudimentary. Did they show up on time? Do they sound professional? And what's their career path like? How did they find us? Why do they want to be here? And if they meet the minimum quals, they go through that phone interview. Then you schedule an on-site or a video interview. And I would use structured interview questions and objective assessments so that way you're avoiding bias and ensuring the best fit. Because a lot of times folks will do an interview and they're just chatting, which feels good, right? If you were wanting to figure out who you wanted to do happy hour with, that's a perfect way to do it. But you're probably missing out on some people by not asking structured questions. So instead of developing like a friendship, we need to make sure that they're going to fit for the job. We don't want, everybody can't be a personality hire. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so sticking to those structured questions are going to be really helpful.
There are going to be some positions that you need a personality hire, and other ones where that's really, if you have someone with a big personality and you're putting them in accounting, right? You're going to be stifling their, and they're probably not going to be very satisfied in that position.
Yes,
so
absolutely. Yeah. And then Also, I would recommend that you take a look at what your recruitment strategy is. There are, in my opinion, like 3 primary ways to tackle recruitment. You can either do it yourself, have somebody internally who's posting, vetting, phone interviewing, doing your on-site. You can hire a recruitment firm to do that for you. And they're usually going to take somewhere between 20 to 40% first year salary as the fee. So it's freaking expensive, but
Whoa.
you don't have to do any of it. Somebody does it on behalf, or you can hire like a recruitment strategy firm. And that type of firm is going to come in, help you draft your job, make sure your job descriptions are good, post them in a sales type way to attract the right people. And it's going to come with an applicant tracking system. And they are going to vet the candidates at the onset and then send them on to an internal hiring manager to do the phone screening and the on-site. So I've got partners in all those areas because my clients that I work with, it's not a one size fits all. They don't all have the same budgets or the same desires or the same staff available to help out with the process. And so it's important for you internally to say, what kind of man or woman power do we have to accomplish this? And what is our budget to get this role in? And then how do we want to run our recruitment process?
That last one it's very high touch. It sounds like it'd be the most expensive, but then you're more likely to find someone who's appropriate for the position. And then you won't have to go back interviewing again and again.
Here's the wild thing. That recruitment strategy one, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Sounded high touch. It's very affordable. It's way more affordable than hiring.
Are you selling it? Is that what's happening?
No, I've just literally seen the cost. If you pay 20 to 40% first year salary to a recruitment firm, which I mean, like I recommend those folks too. But if you're paying a recruitment strategy firm, that's going to be more like, depending on the organization size and how often you're hiring and all of that, somewhere between $1,000 and $4,000 a month. And if that's not 20% of the first year salary or 40%, depending on the skill level of the role, then that's usually more affordable and more budget friendly because you can push it out month over month. So it's like a reoccurring fee. Depends on what your budget looks like.
That's really interesting. I didn't even know that was out there. Although I think I might have had someone recently on the podcast and that's what they were getting at. Okay, so that's hiring. What about retaining? How do we make our workplace, aside from all those legal issues that you spoke about earlier, right? We're going to make sure we're following those. And then the benefits that you also alluded to, so that we can make sure that once we have someone that's a really good fit, things are working out well, that we keep them.
Yeah, absolutely. And those other things I was mentioning was just the foundation. Those are just the basics. So when you're talking about retention, you're getting a little bit deeper into your employee satisfaction, your employee engagement. So providing professional development opportunities, not just saying, hey, you can take training here, or sometimes we have vendors in that come in and do training. I would suggest doing a really simple calendar of once a month, we're going to have a lunch and learn, a brown bag, an online training, a speaker comes in, and just laying it out. Even if you're just adding just a little bit of pomp and circumstance to it, just by throwing it in OpenAI, having it put it into a little calendar view so you can show employees like, we invest in your learning and development. People love to see that. They want to know that they're going to have growth opportunities at your organization. Another thing would be talking about a focus on workplace culture. So open communication, intentional recognition is going to be really important. I read a book years ago. It's like the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. It's like a spinoff Gary Chapman Love Languages book, but it's important to know with your employees how they want to receive recognition. I've led teams before that I can just tell somebody just doesn't feel valued. And I feel like I am loving this person as much as I could possibly love them, but they needed respect and value from their colleagues. And so really understanding, like taking the time to understand our team. By the way, if you read that book as a team, you could put that on your learning and development plan of what you're doing for the month of March or whatever, just being intentional with growth options.
Book club,
That's
recommending
right.
a book club.
Yeah, a book club. It could be the CEO's book club or whatever. Like
I would take it even lower, because I had an experience recently at our holiday party where my staff said to me, Dr. Block, it is great that whenever you come in the morning, you stop by the front desk and you say hi to us. That's it. Like that. A lot of times that's what they want, because often we get in just in time to see our patients. You go to your desk, you go to your exam room, you start seeing your patients. At the end of the day, you're making all your callbacks. You're going over imaging results. You're calling people, you're finishing your notes, and you're exhausted. You just want to go home. But they've been working their butts all day for you. So even something as simple as stopping by to see, a little chat goes a long way. Know their names, know their significant others' names, know their children's names, ask about them. Like, you're talking really high touch stuff. This is significantly lower. And as physicians, we miss the mark on this a lot. And it's easy to do. You're busy. you're drained, you're burned out. Got to do it. You got to do it.
Even physicians or a floor supervisor at a distribution center, like none of us prioritize that kind of relational time. Have you read any Drucker before?
No.
He's like the godfather of modern management. He's old school. And literally he has a chapter in his book called MBWA. And it's just this amazing process. Couldn't be any more simple. It's management by walking around. That's it. And so at an organization, the very first foray into HR that I ever had, that organization required that everyone that had a direct report, so everyone in any kind of management or leadership role, block 30 minutes on their calendar every single day, not to have a snack, not to go to the bathroom, to get up from their desk and walk around. That's it. Look at people in the eyes and say hello. And you know what? Sometimes like you'll come across like a big obstacle that someone's so frustrated with and you can help it immediately. Or sometimes you just get to look at a picture of somebody's dog and be like, oh, cute. It's just intentionality is what you're saying, like actually giving a crap and saying hello to people. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal. So we push it to the back burner and think people don't care. People care greatly about that. So yes, you're exactly
They
right.
want to feel valued. They want to feel appreciated. Do it.
Yes.
And I know you're paying them and you're giving them those great benefits, but something that I talk a lot to my patients about is the strength of our social connections are so important. It's the best predictor of health and longevity.
Mm-hmm.
So build those social connections at the workplace.
Yeah.
It's not hard. So there's one more thing that I want to get to because we're running short on time.
Yeah.
And it's a huge episode unto itself. And we've actually done it in previous episodes because it's conflict resolution. So I just want to get your take on conflict resolution. So two different examples. One would be physician to physician. It's partners. They're on equal footing, or maybe it's a little asymmetric because one is a professor and you're an assistant professor, or maybe one is the practice owner and you own a small percent of the practice. Physician to physician conflict. Do you have any like a framework for thinking about it or any advice on that?
Yeah. What I'm going to say is super simple and something that everybody knows, but most people don't. Don't wait. Don't let it get bigger than it actually is. There's no reason to wait if there's something brewing. I would not wait until it turns into something that you're forced to address.
But it might go away by itself. That's what we're thinking. We're thinking it's just going to go away by itself. So I'd rather not rock the boat.
Yeah, I totally get that. And you know what? It may. There's been plenty of times that I've talked to individuals about their marriage and have said, not everything needs to be shared. Not everything needs to be communicated. And I understand that.
That's how I handle all the conflict in my house until my wife goes, Brad, we need to talk about this.
Yes.
I am ignoring it until she brings it up when she's always the one to bring it up. And it's, thank God she does.
And you know what? I don't know your wife, obviously, but she may be thinking, am I the only one who cares about this? Or why does this matter more to me than it means to, I don't know your personal situation, but it's like same thing in an employment relationship with our partners, with our colleagues. If you wait until someone else if there's tension, to me, and I am an autistic individual, and so I just am very blunt. I will just say it like it is, but I see so many conflicts that are avoidable just by addressing like, hey, I've noticed you've been a little bit terse with me, but I also know we have a ton going on. Is there anything that I can help you with? Even something as small as that, it gives the person the opportunity to say, you know what? I'm just being moody or something's going on with me at home. And then you can love them and care for them through that and give them grace versus thinking like, why are they freaking talking to me like that? And then you get a little terse. And then like, before you know it, you've got a rupture in your relationship and it doesn't need to be that way.
Because of assumptions that you've made, because you're assuming that they're being a jerk because maybe they're reacting to something that you did, or maybe whatever assumption you're making, it could be correct. And then you rectify it, or it could be incorrect and then give them a big hug or whatever.
Yeah. And I would say if it's at a partner level, like physician to physician, bring in a neutral third party, a mediator. And I know that probably seems like a little intense, but I do this all of the time for clients.
That means you're in trouble.
It
that
does.
means something's wrong,
yes.
right?
Okay. Now we actually have to admit something's wrong, but like you could say, I care so much about this relationship that I want to work on it. Now that tone sounds completely different than I don't know how to deal with you. So let's bring another person into this problem. Different tone. You know what I mean? It's all about that tone.
Or I don't want to drag my own biases into this. And let's get a third party to help us work through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A little mediation goes a long way.
Anything different if the power balance is not symmetric? Employee, physician, something like that.
Yeah, I would say whether it's peer or superior, if you come in with a curious posture, this is something that I say to CEOs all the time. please get curious about this, because it's, do you not care about your job? Do you not care about this place? Do you not understand the goals and values? Do you not care about what we're trying to reach here as a team? Blah, blah, blah. Instead, get curious and ask some questions. You all are pretty good about asking your patients a lot of questions. Ask your employees those questions. Hey, I know we keep it pretty busy around here. Have I ever explained to you like the reason why we do this, or the reason why we ask this? Or I've noticed you haven't been meeting goals for the last month. Talk to me about what's going on. If we take that curious posture, it takes the heat off of it, especially if we're their superior coming to them. That's already a little intimidating. And so if we take that curious tone, it disarms the conversation, and then they can share with us. And 9 times out of 10, we're going to be like, oh, that's eye-opening. I didn't know that. And we're going to handle it differently than we would have just coming in hot.
Awesome. This has been jam-packed with tons of great information for practice owners and physicians in any position. So thank you so much for your time. So we can find you at Don't Waste the Chaos podcast, and you run Salt and Light for Women, and that's your PR firm.
Yeah. And then Salt and Light Advisors is my HR consulting firm. And that's primarily my business. The other 2 are just passion projects. But you can find me on LinkedIn, Kerri Roberts. I'm based out of the state of Missouri, and I'd be happy to connect.
I'm assuming you're not the only Kerri Roberts that we're going to find when we search in LinkedIn. Any other advice on how to find you?
Yes, it's actually LinkedIn/in/Kerri M. Roberts, M as in Michelle.
And we'll make sure we link that in the show notes. Kerri Roberts, thank you so much for your time and all that great information.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means you either fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please share it, or like it, or comment on a social media post, or write us a 5-star review. Something. It would really help me out. And maybe what you learned from this episode can help someone else too. The views expressed in this episode are those of the interviewer and interviewee, and don't represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting make it sound like I'm talking directly to you, this is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice, or financial advice, or really any advice. Thank us again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.